And today we have a very special program for everyone. So let's wait just a couple minutes until everyone will join and connect. And let's trying to use the chat. Just say good morning or good afternoon, and from whatever city are you from. I think that we have people from real around the world. Okay, Albania, Poland, Tbilisi, Ukraine, Athens, Georgia, USA. So we have Georgia and Georgia both. Okay, and Italy, Serbia, Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, Turkey, Turin, Toronto, Russia, Boston, whatever, really literally from around the world. Let me remind the rule of the house. Of course, we have so many people, so everyone is muted, but it's nice to see your face, to see each other. So if you can, if it's not too early in the morning or too late in the night, just turn on your camera, and it's nice to see each other from all around the world. If you want to have put a questions to our speakers, just you can write on the chat. We will keep an eye on the chat. If you want to say something, intervene in video, just you have to raise your hand, not physically, but with the icon. So if you go on the participants in the bottom, there is a next to the chat. It will open up all the participant list, and there are some icons. And one is the hands, so your name is coming on the top, and we can give you the floor. So we are expecting around 300-400 participants again from around the world, and we are going to start with no further delay. So today we have let me introduce, and by the way, sorry, another technical issue for who of you who are not familiar with the Zoom platform. On the top right, and you can choose the view, speaker view, if you want to watch only the speaker who is speaking, or a gallery view. Gallery view, you will see everyone, and with a green square who's going to speak, who is speaking. But maybe you want to prefer, you can switch, of course, from one view to another. At the beginning, I will suggest to select the speaker view. So, without further delay, today we have really special section, special masterclass. So our guest is Professor Sukhsimranjit Singh. Professor, let me mute. So Professor Sukhsimranjit Singh is a law professor and managing director of the Strauss Institute of Dispute Resolution at Pepperdine University, Pepperdine Law, and is a mediator, international mediator, and he mediates cross-border dispute and domestic disputes, and based in the beautiful Malibu in California. And for me is a friend, a close friend, is a colleague, a mediator colleague, and we sit in the same board of directors of the Weinstein International Foundation, and is my boss when I have the honor to teach a class at Pepperdine. Is my boss. And but today I really want to leave the floor to another friend and colleague, Blažo Nedić, Blažo is a pioneer in mediation in Serbia and all Balkans, all the region. He's a lawyer, close friend, mediator, and we are running projects together. So we have been so many times in Belgrade. So we are trying to shape the future of mediation in Serbia as well. So I will shut myself. So I want to give the floor to Blažo Nedić and Professor Sukhsimranjit Singh. Blažo.
Thank you, Leo, and thank you, Professor Singh, for joining us. And thank everyone. I'd like to thank everyone virtually from all over the world for your time. And since we know that we have participants from all over the world, we can actually say that we have participants from many different cultures, okay? But so when we say culture, yes, you see the poll that you can choose where you are coming from. Thank you, Adi.
Welcome.
So, but when we say culture, what do we mean? I mean, what does the term stand for? How can we define the culture? And how are, Professor Singh, how are cultural differences affecting every one of us in our everyday life? Professor.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, can I just give a quick thank you to my colleague, Leonardo D'Orso. Leonardo is such a wonderful colleague to know. I'm blessed to have you in my life, Leonardo. And thank you for inviting me to speak today. Mr. Nedić, Blažo Nedić, is a multi-dimensional, intelligent and smart person to be involved with. Thank you for interviewing me, Blažo, as well. I also want to give a quick thanks to Adi. Thank you for being here and helping us. You're a wonderful colleague as well. Now, the question I'm hearing is, what is culture? How do we define it? And what do we mean by the term? And I'm so pleased to be asked that question, because I've been thinking, engaging with this term for about 20 years now. And I've got some ideas. Allow me to share some ideas with the hope that you're all safe, your families are safe, this pandemic has impacted you, but not too deeply. And with the prayer that those who are deeply impacted, that we are blessed to not be in their shoes, but let's just think about them as well. So culture, I think, is how we live our life. Culture is what is important to us, but what we usually don't think about until we are taken out of it. To me, culture is your comfort zone, which we are not aware of. An American understands their culture way more when they travel to, let's say, India or Brazil or Italy and live by the standards, nuances, norms of those cultures. Living in America, an American may not understand what the American culture is unless you think and write about it. So culture is the way of our life. It creates expectations. Now, that's a very important term we don't think about. Culture creates expectations, because as we think about culture and dispute resolution, mediation, we have to always remember these expectations are what people stick to. This is what creates impasse. So how we are taught to live, to how we are taught to engage in our relationships, it is culture. It's like the air we breathe in. Last comment I'll make now in the introduction. I also think culture is multidimensional and is complex. There's a tendency worldwide. It's a tussle. Japanese are like this, Italians are like this, Indians are like this. It's an easy tussle because our minds are usually, if I may say, lazy. We want to come to a quick conclusion. Well, I've been to all the countries I've just mentioned, and they're all beautiful. And there are many people in those countries, and they have many stories, not one story. So I'll always learn culture comes with multiple stories, not one story. Even though our mind may tell us, believe in that one story and move on. It is more complex, more nuanced. I hope that was okay for my introduction, Mr. Nedić.
Thank you, Professor Singh. We will have to touch on the effect of the pandemic on cultures. But before that, let me ask you, you mentioned several countries when you spoke about the culture. So that would be different nations, that different nationalities having different cultures. But
yes,
can we also speak about culture in terms of professional?
absolutely. Yeah. So when I teach and train people in cross-cultural dispute resolution, it's a 7-day, at least a 5-day class. But I usually, Lazo's taking me to a nice place. Usually say culture is at least 3-dimensional. One dimension is what we typically call national culture. And you can put region into it. National culture, American Indian, and then region, New York, East Coast, West Coast, Milan, New Delhi. So that's one dimension of culture, is connected to a place. The other dimension, if you may, usually is about organizational culture. Lawyers, as we all know, many of us are lawyer mediators. Lawyers tend to mediate differently than many of us are non-lawyer mediators. So how do lawyers think as a collective group, for example? How do philosophers think differently? In some ways, a scholar defined culture as a patterned way of thinking followed by a group of people, the way you think. So if you look at organizations, some organizations think in a certain way. They think in a way that kind of becomes their cultural norm. Just another example, go to Google offices and you will see a different culture than you go to Microsoft offices, or you go to a university. You go to Harvard University, it's going to be a very different culture than you go to La Pienza or you go to Pepperdine. And these are organizational culture. The last dimension out of these two that I want to mention is, we should not ignore this one, is individuality. Each one of us bring our own unique take at culture, experience, and life. For example, let me just make you think about this. Let's say I was born in India. I lived in India for half of my life. Then I traveled to the United States. I lived here for half of my life now. And what's interesting is, what am I now? I'm a mixture of both cultures. I've adopted, gained, like my accent. It's not American, not Indian now. So you have to understand that there are individuals like me who can be multicultural, who can be bicultural, who doesn't have to belong to one culture. And more of us are doing that now, right? We are traveling internationally, we're doing work in Leonardo. I can't tell you how many countries he goes every year. Yeah, I know at least a dozen. And every time I call him, he's in Africa, he's in Delhi, he's in Singapore, in Pakistan. And that changes us day by day. So 3 dimensions: national, if you may, organizational, and individual. And I think all 3 in sync work on what our culture is.
Thank you, Professor. Now I think it's much clearer. But you mentioned that we travel, we mix, we see other people, we take on their habits and their culture in a way, as you adopted part of the American culture and you brought part of the India culture with you. But what happens now in this new global situation where we are actually all affected by this pandemic? We obviously had to make certain adjustments. There are things that we are used to doing that we are no longer able to do. So both internationally and domestically, how does this pandemic affect our cultures?
So thank you. That's a very good question, and can't imagine. And it's a difficult question, so I will talk about that later. But so allow me to answer that from a humble lens. Okay, I'm not an expert on the pandemic, but as a legal thinker, law professor, academic, and mediator, let me might give you my take on this. I think there is a new term or old term coming back is global culture. First of all, we have a joint enemy right now. And the enemy is, we can't see it. And her name is COVID-19, or the virus. And what's fascinating is in a very unique way, at least mentally, psychologically, is telling us we as a human race are one and this enemy is against us. Now, I'm taking to a deeper point, which is this. Usually what we do is we have so many identities, all of us, right? But we have these major identities we grew up with or we happen to fall in love with. Religion, right? Sports clubs, right? We happen to belong to even regional identities. I'm a proud American. I'm a proud Indian. This pandemic is making us question, at least in my mind, intellectually, where does these identities, how strong these identities need to be, and can we break them up a little so we can see the other person's humanity as well? Let me give you an example. What happened in World War II, World War I, when people were being killed? If you notice, people were called with names, those who were being killed. They were reduced to insects, rats, whatever the names they were used. They were dehumanized. Now, bear with me for a second. So that means there is still compassion. Even when you're killing someone, you still have compassion. To get rid of that compassion, what you're saying is, you're not a human. You're an insect, so I'm going to kill you. Isn't that fascinating? So human beings, by their very nature, have compassion in them, but we subdue it at times. This virus actually has brought up some amazing compassionate acts around the world. I know so many friends who are donating so much in terms of money, in terms of goods. Food is being served around the world. My own culture, Blazo, you know, I belong to a Sikh faith. I know Sikhs around the world are giving free food, whatever they can in their own capacity. So this culture is bringing that out, but it's not that simple. The movie will be great if it ends here, but unfortunately it doesn't. So let me tell you how this pandemic is actually also bringing the ugly, the wrong side of culture. So we hosted an event with Judge Daniel Weinstein, the Weinstein Foundation we serve on as Mr. Leonardo and myself. And I know Mr. Blazo has been on that foundation as a prestigious fellow. And so in that foundation, what we learn is this. While talking to Judge Weinstein, we're learning that this pandemic is impacting different people differently. There's a new term we are using nowadays. We are all in this together. Yes, as a global citizen, we are in this together fighting the virus. But if you look at within the global society, there are many differences. There are people who can't afford to buy a bread right now because of the pandemic, whereas most of us sitting, I'm assuming, with nice laptop or computer and a microphone and a camera, we can afford that. And is unearthing that those differences. For example, Brazilian example. Did you notice in both Brazil and Mexico, there was less cases in the beginning, and the cases were, what I'm reading were brought in by government officials who were traveling abroad. So the class that brought in the cases today are not that deeply impacted. And the cases have moved on to the other class, and they can't get to the labor class, and they can't stop the spread. So it's unearthing differences in our society. Last thing I will say, and I want to hear your comments. Let me pause here. Is this helping you, Blazo? Or should I tell me what you want me to tackle here? Yes.
No, this is very helpful. Perhaps you can touch for a minute or two about how has the pandemic affected the traditional organizational culture in America, where you live.
You know, different people are responding to this pandemic differently, right? So, for example, in America, what we are doing is that each culture has a very set, deep value system. Like Italia, you think about compassion, meeting each other, collaboration, food, hospitality, music, theater. There is a deep. You talk about India, there is respect for elders, caring, honor, and deep connection between generational lives, touching the feet of the elder. You come to America and the value system changes and it becomes freedom, equality, and this competition, this work ethic, that I want to have a strong work ethic where I can work. Now, if you notice what's happening right now with the pandemic in America, both the work ethic and the freedom to go out and do anything are being suffocated by the regulations. We don't have a complete lockdown, as some countries do, like India does, but it has impacted people. So it's creating this, unfortunately, these divisions in society. And the divisions are like this. One division says, well, let's follow all the rules. Let's cover our faces. Let's not go out. And the other rule is, I want to defy that and I want to fight it. And this is my country. I'm free. Nobody can tell me what to do, what not to do. What's interesting, Blazo, here is that we are forgetting that the common enemy is the virus. But we are so stuck in our human limitations that we find an excuse to fight anyways. I will tell you a fun. There's a documentary, there's a movie on Netflix called Into the Night. And if you watch it, it's about a scene built. I believe it was built in Europe, starting with French actors, and it's cross-cultural. It's beautifully done, and a Turkish person is involved, French is involved, and so forth, so on. And they are fighting over into a plane, and the plane is about to fall, or they're saving themselves from sunlight. So let me stop here and make you think. So these people are about to die if they don't land, but they're still fighting with each other. I want to pause and think. This pandemic, unfortunately, is bad. Fortunately, it's not as bad as it could have been. Imagine it had impacted 70, 80% of people, or imagine it could kill 25% of people it touches. Right now, the ratio is between 1% to 5%. Imagine that, 25%. Unfortunately, we'll still be fighting. And we need to understand why. And some of us rise up, become leaders, and stop it. Many of us stumble to that human need to fight and look for differences and not for unity. Beyond going to this comment, I think I gave you some hint. I will stop here, Blazo.
Yes, thank you very much. We have to be mindful of the time. I think since most of the people on this webinar are actually mediators, let's go back to the question of culture in mediation.
Yeah, so, Blažo, can I stop you? I think we have a question on this. Let me give the floor to Roman Horiwal. Roman?
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Roman. Where are you from? He is a good friend and colleagues, mediators from Poland.
It's complicated because I am the head of the mediation center, Leviathan Mediation Center in Poland, Warsaw, but presently, due to coronavirus, I am in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in the United States. Oh, okay. So I run this mediation the same way I would have done from my home in Warsaw, except that I have 6 hours difference. I have a question, because I would like to take the opportunity that having Professor Singh, because I need some basic, maybe more detailed information. For example, I am very impressed with the book we are just translating to Polish for edition by Tom Futak about his mediation arena. And one of the things that he points out, and I was wondering if Professor Singh has some comments on it, is that it's extremely important how the culture is being considered in conveying the arena, which means setting up the mediation process, and who is invited to mediation, and how do you handle the ambience of mediation? Because one of the things that we struggled all over the country, world, in Poland especially, is to convince people that mediation is actually a good alternative to any other dispute resolution. So the culture must have an impact, and I was wondering if you have any view on that.
Absolutely. And I think it was also going to Mr. Neddick's question that how is culture impacting mediation overall as a process? So let me combine, if I may, both questions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reward. Great question. So the arena that we have to reach in a mediation, the place, the common place, the arena that's beyond the usual fight we need to reach is something that we as mediators are aware of. We understand there's a drama, and after the drama, there's a calm, and we wait for that calm to come. Let me break it down in simple language, and then make a philosophical comment, if I may. Simply, first of all, culture impacts the process of mediation. You should start with even pre-mediation session. So some cultures love meeting before the mediation individually. Let me give an example of, let's say, if I may use national culture examples, Indian clients I have here in the California region. They love to come and meet with me in my house, in my office before the mediation. They want to build with their lawyer. They want to build some trust. They like that presence. They want to bring the presence to me. It's a very unique concept of how some cultures approach pre-mediation. I usually say their persuasion starts before the mediation starts, right? And so so you need to guide the process in a very delicate way because of the presence of culture. How so? Let me pose you some questions instead of giving all the answers. One question is, how do cultures build trust? Different cultures build trust differently. Some build trust over food. Some build trust with namaste, folded hands. Some build trust by shaking an aggressive hand and aggressive eyesight. And so how do you build trust? Each culture, many cultures around the world have a different way of building trust. Are you, as a mediator, improvising, learning? Are you flexible enough to understand the need of the parties from which culture they come from, that you're trying to build trust in the way they are used to, not in the way you are used to? So you have a culture and they have a culture, and you have to see their cultural norms. What are they used to? Let me give another example. I did a mediation with a couple from a Middle Eastern country one time, and not many mediations I've done in that region, but in this one mediation, I understood the need for an elder male family member to speak. Because growing up in India, I understand patriarchy. I also understand how age plays a big role. Look at the webinars being done in India right now. Every one of them, most of them, has been done by a male, an older male, very old male, and with a big title, right? So that's how the culture is. Age is given respect, and unfortunately, some genders are given more respect than the others, which is clearly not what American value system believes in. But let's go back to this example. I was mediating between this couple, and I understood the father walked in, and the father was very elderly, 70, 75 years old, and he sat next to the couple who I was mediating with, no lawyers involved, and he sat behind them. And growing up in India, I knew I need to pay attention to him. I need to respect him. I need to just check in with him. And I walked up, I said hello to him, I greeted him, and I talked to him, and I included him in the process. And he was very pleased. And through that, I could see his son was pleased that I respect. So this is something to build trust. We have to do differently in different cultures. Now in America, you could have ignored it because the disputants are sitting in front of you. Right? So in some ways. So other thing you pay attention to is you build trust through communication. This is what I'm getting at. I'll give you 2 points here. One, some cultures, as our famous professor Gerrit Hofstede have said, build a talk through high context communication. They speak a lot through body language. They speak a lot through pauses, through the eyesight looking down instead of looking into the eyes, through feelings and emotions. Versus other cultures which speak a lot through language. For example, in some cultures when you meet, here is a communication between a father and a son. A son comes in home and son says, "Hey dad, how are you doing?" And the father says, "Son, I'm doing great. How was your day? Did you go to this place?" And they have this word-centric communication. And in some cultures, all you do is, "Dad," and you give a hug, or you give a handshake, or you touch his feet. And then he touches your back and the communication has been done. It's the same communication, but happening very differently. And you as a mediator need to pay attention which kind of communication the disputants are used to. Okay, last thing I'll say, there's way more things to talk about, but a role of identity. To go to the arena we talk about where the calm is, you have to move past what I call identity issues. And this beautiful part of culture is identity plays a very different role in different cultures. In all the mediations I've done with my own community, I can talk about my own community, identity plays such a strong role. But he told me this 20 years ago. I said, "Sir, let's move on." No, he disrespected me 20 years ago. And you could see that hurt on identity. This is not about $1 million, $50,000, $5 million. This is about the hurt, the identity, the dent that was put in it. I'm going to give you one last comment and stop speaking. Last thing you want to see is how people decide in mediation. Mediation, we are constantly working, we're persuading people, we're bringing them together and working with their what we call decision-making, thought process. And one wonderful concept there is individual thought process and collective thought process. Some people come to mediation thinking about their families, their grandparents, what will happen to their kids. Some people come to mediation thinking about themselves. And this can happen in any given culture around the world. We find both individualists and collectivists. So understanding this cultural backgrounds, cultural baggage, if you may, plays a big role. And I think understanding these nuances will put us through a calm and mature mind that can take people to the arena. Mr. Revolt, was that helpful at all? I'm sorry for the long answer. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. You did touch upon many issues. There are many issues that are different in different cultures when we find ourselves in a mediation room. For example, I will mention just some of them: how people negotiate, how people view the concept of money, or the concept of commitment. The other day, there was a discussion about for example, the value. This is a legal culture in different countries, okay? In the United States, a signed contract is basically a law. There is very signed agreement in mediation. Nobody is going to try to avoid it. Whereas in Europe, especially in the Balkans, you need additional assurances. You need enforceable title to be sure that even this signed agreement is going to be valid. But there is another point, another term that I'd like to ask you about, the definition from the point of view of different cultures. And that will lead us to the second part of our discussion. And that's the term, the apology. What do different cultures attach to the term of the apology? Beautiful. We know that some nations, if you will, say I'm sorry very easily. It's like the everyday term. But some of them, for example, a stereotype is that people in the Balkans, if we say I'm sorry, that means we are weak.
Exactly, yeah.
So how do different cultures look at the issue of apologizing?
Blasio, you're going in the beautiful direction. I mean, in some ways, you're asking me to focus on one example of culture, and that is apology given in different cultures. I want to make a quick comment, if you allow me, on what you mentioned about how money and emotions are treated differently in different cultures. That's such an important point. I'll allow me to, if there is any brother and sister from India, you already know this, but we have a concept in India called Maya, M-A-Y-A. It basically is a concept around money. So from a very young age, we are taught, we're literally beaten up to taught, do not run after Maya. Maya is bad. Never talk about Maya. If somebody tells you how much you need, tell them you don't need Maya. So imagine that Sanskriti, that upbringing, and you're sitting in a mediation and the mediator asks you, is $100,000 enough for you? You see how that 30, 40, 50 years is telling you, say, I don't care about money, even if you may care because you're understanding. So absolutely, we are taught differently. And in the Western cultures, if you may, talking about money is perfectly fine because we're not taught through shame lens. In many cultures, you're taught through shame. Look at Japan, look at Korea, look at China. In some schools, if a kid does something wrong, you're told to do something embarrassing in front of the class or go out of the class is public punishment to teach you shyness. Now, coming to your question of apology, that's a brilliant question. I'm so glad you asked me because it was on my mind this morning. You know, in America, we have this thing about apology. There are these 5 things, right? If you say, I am sorry if you did this, it's not a good apology. You must remove the if. So be with me, pay attention how many words I'm speaking now, okay? So a good apology, as per some authors and thinkers in America, would be, I am sorry, Blasio, that I came late to this meeting. This will not happen again. Please forgive me, and I will do everything next time to come on time. Okay, so you see this. So I'm going through this circle of apology. Now, that's a wonderful thinking, but allow me to share a couple of thoughts. That's a Western thought where the need of words and the need to go that deep into rational thinking, not that much emotional, takes over. Let me give you an example, and then I'll come to the other side of apology. Let's call it the collectivist apology, if you may. And Blazo, you started off so right. So I'm giving you a hint. In a case that I handled, two brothers had not spoken to each other since the death of their mother. Okay, this has been 7 years. They both think the other should have been with the mother, and the mother they were neither with the mother when she died in the house. So they're not talking to each other. 7 years later, the younger brother knocks at the door of the elder brother. They have not spoken at all. The elder brother opens the door. The younger brother gives him a hug. Now, is that an apology? Is that some kind of reconciliation? Not a word has been exchanged, but see, the act of coming to the brother, driving there, the act of knocking at the door, the act of hugging, and if this was India, touching the feet of the elder brother, is seeking blessings, which means seeking apology. So apology, let me give you a couple of things on apology. Number one, I think, Lazo, apology is all about context. Context means where, when, how. Where? In a village, in a legal setting, in a law firm, and how it should be delivered. Okay? So this is context. It changes from place to place. There has to be something, what I like to say, sincere apology. So I'll go there. Take it this way. Apology is someone's story. You and I, as a mediator, have no right to tell their story. Each person has their own story. So they also have a way to apologize, a unique way. So let's be so flexible that if we are in Iran, in India, Brazil, China, Korea, Japan, Italy, France, if the way the apology needs to be happen should be dictated, and by some ways, by the way in that culture, apology is accepted. So, yes, that's what I wanted to say. Please.
I'm sorry. Example is fantastic. When you said apology is about context, where, when, and how, may I try to take one step back to this amazing example and ask also why? Why did the younger brother apologize? So go to the actual motivation. What is his motivation for the apology?
You know, I like to talk about, there's a diagram we all know when we're trained in mediation: psychological needs of parties, emotional needs of parties, and the rational needs of parties. And I think apology is more towards the psychological and the emotional need, especially the emotional need of party. An apology is an act to me in humility. When you apologize, basically, think about yourself apologizing to your spouse or to your significant other. Think, if something stops you, it's going to be most likely ego. If something stops you, it's going to be most likely your fear for future. If I apologize today, she's going to expect me to apologize all next 10, 20 years of my marriage, or whatever that fear is. Apology is emotional game because we are a bundle of emotions as human beings. We pay attention to how emotions react to us. And it's an act in humility. So I love your point about why. In this case, the younger brother went because he felt the need to continue to meet the elder brother and have some kind of relationship and not die apart. And he felt as a younger brother, it's his responsibility in this culture to go to the elder brother because he's younger, so he needs to be more humble. And he went and he apologized. So that's a very good point. Last thing I'll say, you should also gauge the past relationship between the parties and the trust level between the parties before you go deeper into apologies. And that matters a lot. But anyways, so it starts a conversation. It leads to humility. And maybe someone just wants to hear the word, I'm sorry. So I'll go a step further. Last point. Sometimes it's not about the sincerity of apology. Listen to it again. Sometimes it's all about saying I'm sorry. The person just wants to hear I'm sorry. And that's usually in relationship that have been like a marital relationships and so forth and so on, where all you're looking for is an act of humbleness for a moment.
you know that I took this class, this course on apology with Professor Robinson.
I do.
And now I wish I take it with you as well, because it gives an amazing array of options. But we've been talking for a while. Let me ask Adi and Leo, are there any questions that...
Yes, yes.
There are a lot, actually.
Can I jump in just for 1 second? There are many questions about culture, and I wouldn't go back because we're discussing, we shifted to apology. But just to acknowledge that many questions about culture have been posed, and we will email all these questions to you, Professor Sukhsimran, and we will make sure that you have a chance to reflect on these things.
Yes,
there is one interesting question on topic now when we discuss about apology from Eugenia. She's asking very simply, how strong or sincere can an apology in a joint session be if it is conveyed through an interpreter in cross-border mediations?
Beautiful question. Beautiful. I had one mediation where I had a Japanese client. First of all, thank you for bringing up the role of interpreters and translators. Interpreters is, those of you who have worked with them, you understand. Just bear with me for a second. Who should you even look at? Let's forget about apology. Just make it very, you as a mediator, should you look at the interpreter when he or she is talking, or the main client who you need to connect with? And in my case, the unfortunate part was not just this, there's an interpreter. The person who I need to talk to also had a hearing problem. So I had to shout at the top of my lungs. And then I'm thinking, should I shout so much? Because the interpreter is clearly listening to me, but what about the client? So it is complex, but I am a believer in joint sessions. I think if rightly done in a joint session with interpreter, without interpreter, we are smart people. We are very good in picking up other people's body language. The issue with us is we're very poor in picking up our own body language, our own facial expressions. So we are signaling everything all the time, but we're very good in picking up other people's body language. So if you have trust that your client and through their coach, through their interpreter will make an effective apology in a joint session, and you have worked with them throughout just a little bit beforehand privately and checked with them, just make sure, as Balazzo mentioned, apology should not go the other way. It should not be, I'm sorry, but if you had not done that, this would not, and then you are in the wrong place. You have to be careful that but, that if should not come in the joint session. Last comment on joint session. I have seen magic happen in joint session. I did a case in India one time, and I had seen brother and sister coming together, and in this case, the brother apologizing to sister. And there was no way I could have carried that apology from one session to the other as a mediator. It had to be, the word I use is raw. The emotions need to be raw, and she needed to hear him. She didn't trust him, and he cried. And how would I cry as a mediator and express the apology? So sometimes I understand the need to go into caucuses and commercial mediations, and I understand the American, especially LA model of mediation, but sometimes there's a beauty in putting people together and letting the process take over, having faith in the process, having faith that people will see that it was a good, genuine effect. So that's my answer. Yeah, good question.
There is another nice question from Poppy Tito Mixelaki, I think from Greece. Is it important who apologize first in mediation? You have to apologize first. No, I have to apologize first. Did it happen?
Leonardo, first of all, you're looking beautiful, man. You're so handsome. So I just wanted to say that. So now it's a cross-cultural compliment to my brother. Okay. Now, in terms of apology, who should do it first? That's a fair question. I usually go to the need, why you want to hear the other party do it first. And can that be accomplished by something else than apology? The reason is, at least in the American region, apology is often seen as admission of fault, admission of guilt. And lawyers do not like that. Lawyers don't tell their clients, do not apologize because you're admitting guilt. There was a famous case out of Rutgers University in East Coast where a young teenager did suicide jumping off a bridge, okay? And his roommate clearly was guilty in webcasting this incident which led to the suicide. And I remember after a few years, the boy who was guilty in this case, not of murder, but guilty to the breach of privacy, said apology after 3-4 years. And the parents of the deceased said, it's too late. We've been waiting for it. So it's the timing of the apology is important. So understand that need. You want them to apologize because you've been waiting for 4 years? Then it makes sense. Or you're waiting because it happened yesterday. So each apology situation is unique. You have to understand the needs, where parties are coming from, and then make that calculation. It's like a chess game. It's like literally, I love playing chess, and my family loves playing chess. So it's like you have to think 5 moves ahead, and you can't just play this one move and be done. You got to think how it will impact 5 moves ahead or 7 moves ahead. And that's how you need to think about apology, because it's a strong example. Good question. Thank you.
Sukhsimran, a question which looks exactly at these things from Laura Bianchini. She's saying, could the professor say something about the difference between to apologize and ask forgiveness? Are they similar signs in different cultures?
Beautiful.
Are there similar signs in different cultures?
I think there was the next topic that Blažo wants to talk about.
No, just go ahead. Just go ahead, because we are running out of time.
Okay. Blažo is a mastermind. He can think like chess master, 7 steps ahead. So I think let's think about the topic of forgiveness for a minute. What is forgiveness? Forgiveness is letting go. Forgiveness is towards forgiving, and I think towards freedom. Let's take a very distinct example. If I want to teach you about forgiveness, I'll give you this example. When I work with people who are racist, who have made comments in their lives that are that clearly shows they're a bigot, I ask them this thing, and I don't tell them you're racist, because that's not going to help. I ask them this thing. I said, if we carry biases in our mind, a man with turban, an Italian man, a Brazilian woman, and all these racist assumptions you may have, who is the person being impacted? The person who is in Italy, in India, and Brazil? And then they think. Or is it, and then my point is, are you being affected? So forgiveness is for both the recipient, but also for the giver. I'm starting with the giver. For the giver, the forgiveness is because you're getting free in your mind. You're holding on to these things for so many years, for time immemorial, and you're letting it go. You're going towards freedom. For the recipient, it is of course important, because then they feel, okay, my apology has been accepted. Okay, it was worth it for me to do it. Okay, the relationship has been restored, and so forth and so on. But there is multiple things going on. And I want to start with this, the impact of forgiveness on the person who is giving forgiveness. It is acceptance that I'm done. There's a beautiful book, Sunflower, which discusses the impact of Holocaust on some Jewish families, and how forgiveness, how many of them chose to forgive and not to fight, and they chose to forgive because that's the only way they could have moved on. And it's powerful. It's powerful. I mean, in my mind, something happened to many minorities in India. And do I keep fighting with the government on that, or do I choose to forgive within my mind? Because India is so complex, it's so beautiful, so many people. But with that one incident, should I keep that in my mind and never go back to India? That's going to be, who's that going to impact, me or India? Okay.
There is a nice question from Sergios Manarakis. In case during a caucus, a party asks you to transfer their apology while you do it, or you tell them to say it by themselves, how do you in mediation, as mediator, convey an apology from one party to another party when you are in caucus?
So, very good question. First of all,
may I jump in just for a second? Excuse me, Professor. So So, because we are running out of time, can you follow up on this question and talk about what are the limits of what mediator can do? This is exactly going to this question. We see that maybe if there is a sincere apology, we could have settlement. So in the other room, we realize that it's not all about the money, it's about the apology. There is this famous British case, Dunnett versus Railtrack, which is cited for something completely different. But it's about a lady whose 3 horses were killed by the rail, by the train. So after the court case, and they didn't settle, actually the rail didn't want to accept to go to mediation. So this is the case where the court denied the costs for the rail, even though they won, because they didn't want to go to mediation. At the end of this, when the journalist, it was a famous case, asked Mrs. Dunnett, she said, but it wasn't about the money. It was about, I wanted them to apologize to me.
Yeah.
So there could have been a settlement. You see that as a mediator. What do you do? Plus, please don't forget this question. How do you do it as a mediator?
So absolutely. I'm going to answer both, I think. First of all, I want to clarify one thing. Apology necessarily doesn't always have to be, I am sorry, yada, 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 I will never do it again, please forgive me. Apology can also be, for some people, it can be money. For some people, it can be gift of a house. For some people, it can be a hug, it can be a cry, it can lead to many things. It can be a public notification in the newspaper. So again, it's their story, it's their need. What kind of, let's use the word act. What kind of act? An act of remorse, an act of some kind of remuneration. What kind of act are they looking for to fulfill that need, that desire? So that's one point. Second point was asked about caucus to caucus apology, or can you render that, or should you have parties do it and should you coach it? That's an excellent question as well. Let me try to give you my take. First of all, we as mediators, okay, we are blessed. I truly believe in that. We are so fortunate to believe in this field because we are working with peacemaking. You know, when I work with Leonardo, his ADR center, his passion for mediation, I've seen him work in so many countries. I see the passion. I see that I'm going to help. I'm going to go to Pakistan and do this. And he does it wonderfully. And we are all in this for passion. We all know that there are other things in other professions that we could do. So first thing is trust your skill set. Trust the magic of mediation. If you have a gut feeling that you can transfer an apology, there's nothing that stops you from going from one room to another and saying, I have good news for you. Folks, the very fact that you have received an apology, whatever kind of apology, you are already winning. Going to the other room and telling them they are willing to apologize, that's a big win. Now it takes a bad mediator to mess it up, right? So if it's a good mediator, you can work with it. And what's the skill set you're going to take? Few things, okay? And I've learned from the pros in the field. Few things like, I want you to be sincere, not to laugh when you talk about apology, right? I want you to talk less than more. Let them ask you questions. I don't want you to overpromise when you go to the other room, because if you overpromise, it's very difficult to get that bigger promise you made than the promise you received from the room. Right? I want you to, if you can, write down a few words when you go to the room. Even reading those words, other party feels like, okay, he did his job, she did his job. Now these are some, and then before any of that, I'll take the permission of the party who gave the apology. And my permission is not legal, which is, can I share this and not share this? That's obvious. My permission is more emotional. And that is to what extent you want me to tell them that you're willing to apologize. And then I'll ask them, are you willing to do it yourself? What if I tell them that she or he will make the apology in person? Will you be willing to do it? And maybe they are. And if that's the point, again, depending upon the context, that may be one of the best ways to handle it. If it's a family matter, relationship between a brother and a sister, let them talk to each other.
I have
a feeling now, I have a feeling that we should craft an apology to the participants, because this session was too short for both of them to topics. Leo.
Yeah. There is a comment from the Highland of Rhodes. I think Nana can tell. In Greece, in Greek, the verb forgive is a sin oro, that literally means I fit in the same place with someone else.
Beautiful.
Is correct in Greek?
You know, there's another thing, and you know, in India it says an apologize. The person who forgives gains power. So you come out. So you gains power because that's the only way they come to you. If they seek forgiveness, that means you are the one who has the power. So always there's a whole wisdom. Always try to forgive because you have done a bigger karam, bigger act, bigger deed by doing it. And that's how the relationships are built. So can I make one more comment on the practice of mediation overall, since we've been focusing on culture? I like to share one thing with you all, friends, and that is so many cultures, so many amazing cultures. First of all, there's something called ethnocentric belief, which means be proud of who you are, ethnocentric, right? But don't be complacent. Don't close your eyes on other cultures. Don't start judging the other and be so proud of yourself that you're the best. But at the same time, be happy and proud of your parents and whatever your upbringing is. My point is this. I think the same applies to mediation. We need to be proud of who we are as mediators. We are one profession that we don't sleep. In a sense, if we are a mediator in the morning, we are mediating at night because we're constantly talking through the lens of a mediator. If you're a doctor, you go home, you take off the white coat, you're done. If you're a mediator, it shapes our identity. It builds who we are. It changes the world. And right now, there's more need of us as mediators. In apology, in cross cultures, definitely in cross-cultural situations. Look at around the world, there's so much need for cross-cultural conflict that needs to be eradicated, needs to be understood. Any last questions, Leonardo? I think we have 3 minutes.
There's a couple that I can, in Albania from Merita, we say the one who forgives is a brave man. But there was another question too, actually was Professor Nedik asking that to tell you a little bit about your meetings, that in the Balkans, people, men do not say sorry, do not apologize. And this is the same in Sicily. You know, they think that if I give you an apology, I'm not really a man, I'm a weak person. So this is how can be masculine. How can I stay masculine and like in the Balkans terms, on Sicilian terms, and apologies.
You know, can I comment on that?
Yes.
There is a beauty. You know, people bash up American culture all the time. I want to say something amazing about America. It has changed me, I think, for the better. In that one amazing sense is how do you work with women? How do you treat women? Is it okay to apologize to a woman? And America has taught me a few things, and there are problems here too, absolutely. I'm not saying all Americans are perfect in this sense, but what I've learned is this. We are truly equal in many ways. And to understand a life partner, if woman is your life partner, you're a man, and thinking, I'm a man, I will never do this, what you're doing is you're harming yourself, not the other. You're harming yourself because you're not fulfilling the potential of your relationship, which will be fulfilled if you truly open yourself up and be vulnerable. Being vulnerable is beautiful, and vulnerability is also powerful, right? And I recommend you read and listen to Brené Brown, an American author, a woman author, who really does some wonderful work on vulnerability. Brené Brown, B-R-O-W-N, B-R-E-N-E. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that.
Sukhsimran, just a quick question from Cosmin Julian Gitza. What about too many apologies? Would that dilute the whole act?
That's it. Now we're getting too difficult. I think we should end the session now, right? So absolutely. I think like for we all know scarcity principle. You don't want to overdo anything in life. In India, we call it balance. It's a famous, very quick, I'll take 30 seconds, example of a very big, famous guru I heard, a teacher who came, and he started his lecture. He was speaking on spirituality, but he started his lecture like this. He said, and long story he gave, I'm going to cut short the story. In the end, he says, I don't want you to be like sun when people are afraid to look at you and they can't look at you. You're so hot, you're so angry. And I also don't want you to be like moon, where missions can be accomplished by stepping on you. Have balance in life. And I think that applies to apology too. You don't want to make it so aggressive so many times that, you know, or that you become a moon, that you've done it so many times. But you also don't want to be sun, that the other person thinks, oh, this guy is never going to do it. So balance is important. But lastly, I will say that rule is trumped by one thing. And remember that is relationships. If a relationship can be preserved, regardless of whose fault it is, sometimes an apology can do magic. And the only exception to that rule is abuse. Do not apologize when you are victim of an abuse, psychological, physical, any abuse. Then you stand up, you fight. However you need to do it. But if that's not the case, if love is involved, then apologize.
Great. Just a lot of comments. O'Brien, great session, too short. Vicky, this class was beyond of amazing. Thank you so much, Professor, and great contribution and so on. I mean, thank you very much. Just 1 minute. I'm sure that a lot of people now, they want to come to Malibu to know more.
Yes.
So what do you teach and what the Strauss Institute can do to become a better mediator? What is
I'm going to share a quick link with everybody, and that is our website. And my first request would be if you can come to the Strauss Institute website, and that would be wonderful. You can see some of our trainings and conferences and summer programs. So we are top-ranked institute in the nation. There are some really good places to go and be part of.
You're the number one. You're in the nation on dispute resolution. There's no doubt that Pepperdine, the Strauss Institute, is number one.
And but we are a collection of a family. We are a team, and I'm so blessed to belong to a team that does some amazing conferences, and I'm also doing some webinars. So take a look at this link if you're interested, or take a class. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. And we have some amazing masters in dispute resolution programs, world-renowned programs. If you have any questions about that, you can write to me, write to Leonardo. He's our faculty member now. And we always look for some terrific professors. If you have the passion, you have devoted your life to the field of dispute resolution, and you got diversity in the background, and you can do the magic in the classroom, because we need to do magic in classrooms to make leaders. And we owe a responsibility to our world. Because imagine how many leaders we can all create together if we start teaching together.
Even accept me as a professor. So.
He's good.
Thank you very much. So any last comments?
Let's make a comment about.
And then I'll have one last question.
Strauss programs. I was fortunate enough to attend the LLM program in dispute resolution at Strauss. And I actually took that after being a mediator and practicing mediation for 15 years. But when I came to Strauss and Pepperdine, it opened a whole new world for me. So if you are considering, this is not marketing, I'm sharing my experience. Okay, even professors at Pepperdine looking at my CV were asking me, well, why did you come? Basically, you're doing everything. You're mediating, you're teaching, etc., etc. I said, I heard you are the best. I want to see what that means. And truly, it opened a whole new world for me. So if you're considering advancing your career academically or in any other way, please go and check out Strauss.
Right. Adi, I think you had a similar experience. You took some classes as well.
Yes, just last year I was very fortunate to be Professor Sukhsimran's student last year in Malibu. One last question, if I may, Professor, from Margaret Holtzman from Australia, our colleague from Perth, Australia. Margaret is
night in Australia is yesterday or maybe.
I'll tell you, it's beyond midnight. So thank you, Margaret, and all our other colleagues staying late to watch. We're humble and grateful. What is your response to my assertion that every mediation is cross-cultural because expectations, etc., of each participant are unique to the person?
Okay, I've heard that comment before, I'll be honest, and I want to give you some comments and quickly. And that is, there are two schools of thoughts generally. One is that every conversation we have has cross-cultural, every mediation we have is cross-cultural because there are different cultures in each one of us. And then there's another school of thought, which let's call it traditional, which is only mediations that involve people from different nations. An Iranian, a Brazilian, an Italian, so forth and so on, is cross-cultural. Again, my quick answer is the truth is somewhere in the middle. You don't have to be from a different culture, nationality to belong to different culture. At the same time, people who do belong to different nations do bring more culture into mediation than who belong to the same family. And I understand some families could be so different. So what I call it, the degree to which culture plays a role, the degree increases when you have a strong identity and culture present. That's pretty much it. So you have to pay attention to it a little more. You have to give regard to it a little more because that cultural role has increased. Quick example, one mediation I did with an Indian client in Oregon. At the end of the mediation, it was a divorce case. We had lawyers, and I don't do too many divorce cases now. But at the end of the mediation, she says, I need to call my father. My father is in India. And it should have clicked to me because she grew up in India. And in India, you make some of the big decisions like divorce and marriage and buying a car and a house with the help of parents. Usually, not every Indian does it, but usually many do. And look at that. That's the impact of culture on the decision making, right? So it can play a bigger role. It can play no role. And that's why we as mediators, the best part of us is as professionals, we are flexible, we improvise, and we think on our feet. We don't run away. We are the one who bring hope to the room. We are not the one who says, oh, this is too difficult. When they go down, we go up, right?
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. There was another, this is not a question, a statement of Rossana Novati. She's a lawyer from the north and say Italy is very long and even mediation from northern Italy and southern people from the southern. I mean, is a cross border. Is a kind no cross border, but is there is some culture difference.
Absolutely.
And
that's a great point. And just sorry if I bring India, but look at India. We have 28 languages, major languages, 200 plus dialects, 6 different cuisines plus in India. And so when you talk about which India are you talking about? The 75% of India that lives in villages, or the 25% that live in big metropolitan cities. So I can go on and on, but that's the unique part of. Yes.
I think in Italy we have more cuisines than in we have less languages but more cuisines.
let's settle on one thing, that Italy and India both love food. How's that?
Yes, that's for sure.
Don't forget the Balkans about food.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Can I share one thing, Leonardo?
Yeah, absolutely.
I will just share my LinkedIn. If you can be friends with me, there's so many wonderful folks here. I just shared a link of my LinkedIn profile. Please join it, and I would love to collaborate with you and answer any questions you have, and visit your homes and bring you to my home at some point. Visit us at Pepperdine. I live on campus, so here you go. So you can come to my home.
Absolutely. So we have, some feedback. Is more than 80% is excellent. Evaluate excellent these sessions. We will have another session next Friday with our common friend Colin Rule. Colin will join us talking about the impact of IT, of video conference, of ODR in mediation, and especially during this challenging time. So again, it's hard to close this section. Actually, it's very hard for me to push the button leave hand sessions. So please, what I usually do, I unmute all mic now. Let's give up a round of applause.
Bene, se c'è qualche correzione lo facciamo al momento. Perfetto.
Muchas gracias.
Sì. Dico subito, finiamola qui a 55 te lo prendo e basta, col bozza.
Non parlassi di cavolo.
Relation. Dico io un giorno, dai, te lo dico io un inizio, hai qualche difficoltà, qualcosa?
A tutti.